done, they go into. Okay, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me now. Okay, perfect. So I thank GIZ for putting this together and giving us an opportunity to present in this webinar today. And what I would be talking about is our multi-regional, multi-country, multi-city, multi-year program on promoting low-emission urban development strategies in emerging economic countries. In short, we call this urban-LEDs. And just to give you a program, the European Commission and in partnership with UN Habitat started it and is slated to end of August this year. This is a program which is being implemented in 4 countries. The implementation is in 4 countries: Brazil, South Africa, Indonesia, and India. And we have sister learning cities from Europe. We're not sister cities in the technical sense of the word, but these are partner cities in the program, which would then advise and which would showcase their best practices, and also vice versa from the global south to the global north. Coming down for implementation countries, the way this program is structured is we have 2 model cities and 5 to 6 satellite cities in each of the countries. Coming to India, our model cities are Rajkot in Gujarat and Thane in Maharashtra. In addition, we have 6 satellite cities, including Shimla, Coimbatore, Gwalior, Panaji, Pimpri Chinchwad, and Nagpur. The reason we have the model and the satellite cities is, of course, the main reason being the budget. But we know that Rajkot and Thane are, so to say, leaders in this field in the region. And so the intent was to set up and to support the cities implement a structured program, which they could then showcase to these other cities which have shown a very strong interest, but have not yet progressed to the level of Rajkot and Thane. So this was the intent of having our model and satellite cities. Now, coming down to the program itself, based on the philosophy of this methodology, which is the Green Climate Cities methodology developed by ICLEI, where we take the city through a 9-step process. Those since the days of its inception, I think mid-90s, early 2000, we had the Cities for Climate Protection program for which had a 5-step climate planning process. But now, since cities have advanced and we have advanced methodologies, advanced reporting required different forms of verification and reporting to Access Finance. Considering all that, we have, in one sense, upgraded our CCP to GCC, and now we have further steps included into the methodology. We take the city through this process. Typically, this process has 3 different main steps, or phases, I should call them, and each phase having 3 steps, where a city goes through the process of actually committing towards a low emission development strategy. It commits, it mobilizes within the structure of the local government, also mobilizes with the stakeholders. It looks at looks at its existing governance frameworks, its existing planning processes, national priorities, what are the existing development plans, and then it goes into a process of assessing greenhouse gas emission inventories, which would support the assessment of priorities for low emissions development within the cities. Now, once these inventories are done and priorities are identified, cities then go ahead and develop an action plan, a strategy and an action low emission action plan, which is then put in front of the municipal council, which would approve it, and then it becomes a long-standing plan. Cities have the freedom to choose how long this initial planning process should be. We indicate that it should not be anywhere, and it should not be definitely less than 3 to 5 years, but then it also has to be in line with the planning cycle of cities. So once this is done, they go into the implementation phase, and then the implementation phase goes parallelly with the monitoring, reporting, and most of us are talking and hoping the cities would pick up. Could either be in-house, could be voluntary, could be with involvement of the provincial government, with involvement of the national government. The intent of this program was to link to the national government's goals for mitigation, and then see how it can be supported through local action. While we have succeeded in certain cities, like to a certain extent in Brazil and South Africa, due to the way the national government works in India, we have not been very successful in doing this. Like all of us know, India does not officially promote it. It does voluntary reporting on the mitigation front, but it does not commit to mitigation targets. So given that scenario, we find it a little difficult to get the official national to link this program officially to the national level, to the National Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change and their programs. But this program is endorsed, not officially, but they know that this program is going on, and they're happy for this program to go on in cities, and in that sense they support it. This program is linked to a whole lot of other national programs that are rolled out either through the MOEF and CC or the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. But officially, we do not report to them, and this is not part of any kind of a NAMA framework. For example, India does not even have a NAMA framework so far. So that is the context of linkage to the national government, which we were hoping we could do in the MRV, but given the system in India, like I explained, it's not possible. So once implementation and the MRV phase, on the review phase, there would be an enhancement of goals and enhancement of plans, and what needs to be then priority for future years. That would come towards the end of the planning cycle. In a nutshell, this is, like I said, if we look at the identify priorities and phase 1 of analyze, the big challenge that cities have GHG emissions inventory ready, and the process of doing it is also a little challenging to cities. But for Thane and Rajkot, they have been cities which were part of the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, had a program where cities were developing solar city master plans. ICLEI had handheld and supported these cities to develop their solar city master plans, during which time they had developed a GHG emissions inventory. And now through the UrbanLEDS program, they are redoing their inventories, they're updating their inventories. And like some of you know, there is this global protocol for community scale GHG emission inventories, which is put forth by WRI, C40, ICLEI and partners. So the inventories that are developed under UrbanLEDS are in line with the GPC. Now, just very quickly, I'm not going to go into the details, but typically what we are seeing from our urban-led cities is exactly this, that we have the residential sector, which is the largest guzzler of energy, and followed by the transport sector. In terms of energy use by source, 49% is from the electricity use, and then it is usually followed by either LPG, which is percent, or diesel and CNG, basically fuels that are used for transport purpose. So this is the kind of analysis that is done. Cities are supported in their data collection and of the inventories based on IPCC methodologies. If we look at electricity consumption per sector, that is no surprise there. The 50% is consumed by the residential sector, followed by the commercial, and then the industrial and agricultural energy use. Energy consumption figures, we look at the GHG emissions. They by and large follow the pattern of energy consumption, where from the residential sector you would see the largest, the residential sector to be the largest emitter of GHG emissions, and then followed by the commercial and institutional sector, the industrial, agricultural energy use. Now, if we look at the per capita GHG emission, for example, in Thane, it is much lower than the 1.7 that is the country's average. It is 0.92 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent in Thane city. GHG emissions only for the local government sector, where we are looking at only local government, service provision, local government buildings, transportation of the local government, and we try and figure out where it is that in its own operations the local government can better its performance. So when we look at energy use and GHG emissions, it is the facilities that take the cake, both in terms of energy use as well as GHG emissions, followed by the mobile and then the buildings. Now, what we see here is, especially when we look at street lighting, when you see water pumping, that is where the two big service sectors which use energy to the maximum extent. Now, once we have done this in Thane's inventory process, which is currently the council is in the process of approving this inventory, so this is still draft for them. But once this is done, we move into in the program, we move into developing pilot initiatives and pilot implementation on ground to support Thane Municipal Corporation's activities. Unless local authorities see a practical demonstration of all of this, this entire exercise becomes extremely theoretical for them. So in Thane, taking inputs from the local authority and from their engineers, they identified that they would like to look at an ESCO program for street lighting, an awareness program for schools, installation of LED street lights. This is an extremely complex system in local authorities here, specifically because none of the most times the street lighting is not as per design standards, and the local councillors, people do not necessarily agree with the lighting standards which are there in the country, and so there is tremendous amount of discussion on how to make this profitable. So all of this, the Urban Lights program is taking the corporation through this entire discussion and helping them develop an ESCO program. And then we are looking at through multiple programs, not just training and awareness, but looking at how RE can help them, how we can build in conservation practices, how we can look at enhancing the carbon sinks. So it's like an integrated approach that we're having, and we are trying to develop one school on that model. And then there is also looking at improving efficiency of driving. So we bring down those emissions from the transport sector, which we see are pretty high. So in short, this is where Thane is today. They're in the process of developing their lead strategy. I will just show you the process for that. The similar process was followed in Rajkot as well, where no surprise, the patterns of consumption and patterns of emissions are pretty much the same. I'm not going to go into the details. Here we saw about 1.22 tons of carbon dioxide emissions, still lower than the national average. Now, when we come to this LED's development process, this again, we have looked at several models, and we were wondering which of these could be relevant to the Indian context. But just the lack of planning and economic data at the local authority level becomes such a challenge. So in that sense, this is really difficult for us when we look at actual data and trying to crunch numbers to arrive at a LED strategy. So then we developed something which is from a scientific sense a little simplistic, but for practical reasons this is the best you can do with the kind of data available within cities. So we look at their planning process, and we do a demand forecasting for their various services and sectoral energy demand and GHG forecasting. Based on that, we look at what their vision is. So this is a discussion that it's a stakeholder involved process, where the stakeholders are both from the local authority as well as from the community, and there are 3 to 4 stages of stakeholder involvement. When finally, based on what the goals are for the city, what the vision is for city development, and then what the priority should be from the GHG emissions point of view, we try and do a combined analysis of this and help the city develop their LED strategy and action plan. This slide here where I've said energy demand and service provision forecast, this is the challenge at the local authority level. So for each kind of energy consumption, for each energy source, we are trying to look at what are those variables using which we can do a realistic forecast, not something theoretical, but a realistic forecast. So for example, when PNG consumption, we look at cost of PNG, the number of connections. Then we look at the demography and see how all of this interacts, and then we do a forecasting for a certain time period, typically for 20 to 25 years. So this is how that forecasting is done. When we look at solutions in that, let's look at solutions. We have developed within the Urban Let's program a solutions gateway, where there is a solutions package per sector. There are different case studies, and city governments can then pick out from these different solutions which are already up there. There is a linkage to policy. There is a linkage to actual implementation, to costs, to what it means from a community perspective, what does it mean from an institutional perspective. So all of these, for every solution package, each one of these items are addressed, and all this information is found on the solutions gateway. This will be put out to the public very soon. Now, coming down, that would be in a nutshell what we are doing for the LEDS planning process and how we are supporting them. Now, in Rajkot, we have almost progressed to the point where we have the thing with the local authority, waiting for their final approval. In the meanwhile, Rajkot is also progressing on doing their pilot implementation, closely linked to the emission. They see it in doing a thorough study and energy audit of their water works, and with help from the Urban Let's program, they're looking at energy efficient street lighting. They're looking at installation of decentralized wastewater treatment systems to clean up not only the point sources which are going into their water streams, but also looking at biogas production from that, and of course rooftop SPV installations in schools. This is something that they would like to take up in all their activities through this program.
I just want to remind on the time, Soumya.
Yes, please. Yeah, I'm almost done. So all these cities through the Urban Let's program are then linked to international reporting through the Carbon Climate Registry, which ICLEI manages, and which is up there also linked to funders for funding their potential actions, potential mitigation actions. Now, Urban Let's program forward, we are linking it also to a program which is called TAP, which transformative actions, where this is a pavilion that we would like to put up in the upcoming COP, where we are trying to bring in about 100 mitigative and other cities as well, and trying to finance these mitigative actions as per their led strategies. So in a nutshell, we are taking the cities through from the planning process to the implementation and linking it to potential finance as well. That in a nutshell, I think, is the Urban Let's program. So thank you very much, and sorry for the time overrun.
Thank you a lot, Soumya, for this insight into Urban Let's and the action planning that is more based on the greenhouse gas emission reduction. And now I will head over to Manjit. Please, presenters, be reminded of the 10 minutes of time to be in the time frame. Oh, I fear we lost Manjit. Vaishali, could you kindly go ahead and we wait for Manjit?
Okay. So I hope this is visible to everybody. Yeah. Am I audible? Yeah. Am I audible to everybody? Yeah. Great. Um, okay. So good afternoon, everybody. What I present to you today is a case that was developed jointly with ICLEI, South Asia. Soumya, my previous presenter, was also part of development of this action planning, and we did this jointly with the Nasik city, the Nasik Municipal Corporation. It's called Sustainable Urban Habitat Action Plan. It's actually a climate action plan, but there was a reason that it was named Sustainable Urban Habitat Action Plan. It's based on the National Mission on Sustainable Habitat of the Ministry of Urban Development. And that was then the idea about naming it. India also has a certain reservation about naming its climate action plans as city climate action plans. That's also the reason for naming it SUHAP. The objective of this was to develop a replicable model, and this was the first pilot test run in an Indian city. The idea also was that we would build up the capacities of a regional training center in the area, and then that training center could further replicate this methodology in the state. The SUHAP addresses both adaptation and mitigation, and based on a combined, and it's based on a combined approach, which then looks at developing a joint action plan for both adaptation and mitigation. As stated earlier, this is, the enabling framework comes from within the Government of India, where this is the National Action Plan for Climate Change, and the responsibility for that is with the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. There are 8 missions under this program, and the Ministry of Urban Development is responsible for this habitat mission, the others being solar, climate, energy efficiency, sustainable agriculture, Himalayan ecosystem, and strategic knowledge capacity development. Under the National Mission on Sustainable Habitat, there are 6 sectors that the mission covers: solid waste management, energy efficiency in buildings, transport, urban planning, stormwater, and water supply. You might wonder why only these sectors and why not the others. The idea is that more or less the city is somehow responsible, the municipal corporation is somehow responsible for these. So at least something that is there under their control, they would be able to take care of. The only sector that was left out was wastewater, which we then included. And why Nasik? Why not any other city? Would be the second question that would come to anybody's mind. When we were introducing, there was a training that was developed under the precursor to the TurboClick, that was TUEVA's network, which is called Cities and Climate Change. Sometime 2011-12, we were training all cities and states within India on the aspects of cities and climate change, urban climate change. And it was only Nasik, under its dynamic leadership, that came forward to say, okay, we would be willing to develop a climate action plan for our city. So what we did was we trained all the senior and mid-level officials within the city, and from there then we started. The training institute Mitra was identified. It is a local institute within Nasik. It's located within Nasik, so it was easy whenever we were doing different exercises that were part of preparation of this plan. They were always on board. Coming to Nasik, so Nasik has a population of 1.4 million inhabitants, with an average population density of 4,000. But it has a very high population, a floating population of up to 1 million, and this is because it's a very religious place, but not only religious, but it's also an industrial hub in the state of Maharashtra. So that is, that is a very unique character to this. So under the SUHAP, we went through a very detailed methodology. We started this exercise in 2013, and we finished finally in March this year. So it took us about 1.5 years to complete the exercise. There were certain things that were specified within is now gone into implementation. I will run you through the steps that were carried over the period of time. Starting with the baseline collection, we had to develop data collection formats for both adaptation and mitigation. For energy consumption, we looked at residential, commercial, institution and industrial buildings, urban transport, water supply, wastewater and solid waste management. For general rainfall and temperature related data, we collected the data from the Indian Meteorological Department. And if you see, the rainfall and temperature, there is not too much of variation over a period of time. There is not significant change, you see. So one would say, it's sorry. Okay, so as you can, just to come back, as you can see, the average annual rainfall and temperature, there's not too much of variation. So we used one of the tools from ICLEI. It's called Heat Plus to calculate the emissions, GHG emissions. And from the data that we had collected, we came up with the pattern for energy consumption in the city of Nasik, which clearly shows that the energy consumption in building sector is the highest, followed by transport. And others, the area of water supply, wastewater and municipal waste is not really so significant. But if you look at the emission patterns, it's more or less reflecting the same, where building sector and transportation is the highest. But you start seeing emissions coming from water supply and wastewater and waste, which start to show at least on the graph. And it basically reveals that the Nasik city contributes about 2.85 million tons carbon equivalent, and per capita emissions are not very high, 1.7 tons per year. We also did, analyzed this 4x4. There's a assessment report by Government of India and a study by TERI. and we looked at the perceptions and experiences from the local population. And they, even when the trend shows there's not too much change, the expected, there's a very it's expected to, the temperature and precipitation is expected to change a little, meaning the number of days with high temperature and the number of days with high intensity of precipitation are expected to increase. Each of these sectors was also looked at an anticipated impact. So what is it that you can expect? So ranging from rising temperatures and risk of landfill fires to, because of the increase in landfill fires for solid waste management, to probably an increase in water demand because of the rising temperature in water supply, or for stormwater drainage because of the heavy precipitation, there would be flooding, clogging of drains and flooding. So there were different kind of impacts that were there for the for these sectors that we were looking at in the system. Once this information was gathered over through a stakeholder analysis, we looked at assessing the risk on the likelihood and the consequences of each of these events. So depending on how rare or almost certain it was, to insignificant to catastrophic, these events were then rated by the stakeholders over a certain period of time, and we ended up having a risk profile which was again divided sector wise. So if it was stated, if vertical expansion was looked at in urban planning, it was perceived to have a high risk, where probably from the mitigation perspective it was not really significant. But if you looked at the energy sector, where demand for energy would increase, which was again a very high risk, it would definitely have a account for a large share of GHG emissions. So the risks would accordingly spread out. Based on that, we also did a vulnerability assessment and looked at responsiveness, resourcefulness, and capacity to learn. Different actors were then again in the stakeholder dialogue were asked to rate the vulnerability of each of these sectors, and then the adaptive capacity of each of these sectors. And what we came out was, this is just indicative, for each ward we came out with a certain vulnerable population, supporting departments, and what was it that was at risk. So if you see, there were two wards or 3 wards under stormwater drainage which were at high risk, and the vulnerable population was the slum dwellers which were living close to the riverbanks. Or if you look at urban planning, because the green is so little in these areas.
Excuse the interruption, Vaishali. Could you kindly come to the last slides? Thank you.
Yeah. So so what you see is this was then put together, and we had a climate risk mapping, and for each ward you could see the potential impacts, the actors and supporting potential actors. This was then further analyzed, and you see just a compilation of urban planning, where you see issues, the measures, existing measures that are planned, and the potential impacts in the city for each of these sectors. We went down to do a ground truthing, and we found that more or less in each of these wards there were 7 or 8 zones, and each of these zones or divisions, the critical issues and potential solutions were almost similar. Post that, an action plan was developed. This is just a snapshot of the same, which were looking at infrastructure and non-infrastructure measures. This is an indicative slide basically to show that there's energy consumption in buildings and what it could have for awareness generation or bylaw formulation and maybe infrastructure development, and how it would cost. So at the end, I would say we are now looking at implementation, And there are three modes of implementation that we are looking at. One is the local, which is looking at integrating all our recommendations in the master plan, and implementation through the city's own funds. Kumbh Mela is one such activity that is happening. Aligning with the central and state schemes that are existing or have just been launched, which are looking at climate proofing the plans that are there. And of course, there is the international fund where GIZ and Rockefeller are funding two of the activities, one under solid waste and one under wastewater. And so the implementation is already happening, but we are also looking at aligning this thing further, so that all our the effort that we did over the 1.5 to 2 years is then put in. Let's say there's a toolkit probably available, and we are able to align all the activities for all plans that are made for all cities. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, Vaishali. And now we are excited to see your presentation, Manjeet. Please be reminded of the 10 minutes. Thank you. Manjeet, are you still here? Unfortunately, we cannot hear Manjit, and yeah, let's give him another 5 minutes to try if he's able to connect, and also if we hear him speaking on the microphone. I would like to give the possibility for you as the audience to raise questions to the other presenters, to Sumya and to Vaishali. Does anybody have questions to a presenter or to the whole group?
Uh, uh, yeah. Hello, can you hear me now?
Great, Manjit. Yeah, we can hear you clearly now.
Okay, just a minute. I start off.
Can you share your desk?
Okay, okay, just a minute. Is it visible now?
It's loading now, yes.
It's there.
Yes, we can see it.
Uh,
Can you put it in full screen?
yeah, it's on the full screen mode itself. And let me again do it. Yes. Can you see it in full screen mode? Maybe loading.
Yeah, no, it's not loading. But feel free to go ahead, Manjit. Now it's
Yes.
loading, yes.
Yeah. Apologies for a series of technical glitches. I'm so sorry from my end. But the project which I wanted to experience, which I wanted to share with all the audience was a project of AdaptCap, which was funded by European Union, and this project was on climate proofing of vulnerable coastal communities. And if you look at the project in a glance, it was funded by European Union, European Commission, and it was of the duration of 3 years, which started in 2011, and the project ended in 2014. This was a mix of the rural as well as the city program, and the way it was distributed, it would come into my next slide. And the partners were GIZ, then we had Adelphi, ICLEI, from where you heard Soumya. We also had our local implementation partners in Andhra Pradesh. It was Academy of Gandhian Studies, and in Tamil Nadu it was the Avai Village Welfare Society. Overall, broadly, the project was to kind of do a ground level assessment of the situation in form of vulnerability assessments, the needs assessment, try to kind of get the community's views and kind of their needs on a host of kind of a pilot projects, select those pilot projects, do some capacity building around it, and then basically try to link it with the existing government and schemes, try to integrate the issue of climate change into the local level planning process, and share and disseminate the learnings to the different stakeholders. So this was a kind of a nutshell project. Yeah. The goal of the project was to reduce the vulnerabilities, as I said, of coastal communities and cities in Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh to climate change, and strengthen the capacities of the local authorities and population on climate change adaptation, mitigation, and disaster risk reduction. So there were three aspects to this project, and the locations were the 6 cities of 2 coastal states, located in the southern part of the country, that is the state of Andhra Pradesh and the state of Tamil Nadu. And the 3 cities which were in Andhra Pradesh were Vishakhapatnam, Ongole, and Kavali. And with each city there were like 3 villages around it, so there was a cluster kind of approach with 1 city and 3 villages around it. And in Tamil Nadu, the 3 of the cities were Kadalur, Nagapattinam, and Thiruvallur. So these were the 6 cities, and there were 3 villages, so total of kind of 18 villages which formed as 6 clusters for this project. Basically, what I will be presenting is mainly on the urban aspect, the kind of approach which we had at the city level and at the community level, At the city level, it was mainly the process of engaging with the local stakeholders, the community, as well as with the government authorities at the local level, which was to kind of formally introduce the project to them, get their agreement through the memorandum of understanding, share the project activities, get their consent, and also sign a kind of a memorandum of understanding with them, so that we can kind of partner and implement the activities jointly in future. A formation of a city task force and a stakeholder group at the local level, and the kind of engagement of these stakeholders in various activities of the project. Then from the engagement activity, moving on to the city level climate change research and needs assessment, to develop a detailed city profile and collation of data to kind of further the process. Is the presentation working? As I can see the message that sharing is not working.
No, unfortunately it's not working, but I will share it here.
Okay. Yeah. So can you share it and then I move ahead? Yep.
But you don't see the full screen.
Yeah, Eva. Yeah, it's there now as a screen, I think. Can I move ahead?
The next slide.
Yeah, I was on this particular slide, and yeah, you can now move to the next slide. So the various approaches of engage. Can you switch off your mic, Eva? Yeah, now it's better. Right. So the two approaches which I mentioned of engagement and city level climate research and needs for which, where we kind of engage with the local stakeholders on to kind of ascertain the needs of the community, and also to take them into cognizance. The various tools which were kind of used in these particular approaches, which I would kind of try to go into the next slides, the next three slides, the various tools which we use. So first tool which we used was certainly a shared learning dialogue process. So SLD, which kind of helps both decision makers and those with the stake in outcomes to have a fuller spectrum of understanding of the factual conditions and operational constraint, and also recognize the available resources of information and its certainly quality. So the shared learning dialogue process, which we kind of do the vulnerability assessments, to kind of talk to the community. Basically, it was divided into 5 parts, and formally we did it in a kind of a half-day event with our partners. So where we first always introduce the project formally as to what we are intending to do, what is the objective of our visit, and so a basic introduction. Then what is activities at the city level, what we are doing, what is the stakeholders engagement and participation, what we want them to do in this particular process, what are the kind of and then kind of do various types of group exercises in form of a vulnerability ranking, of first starting with a wealth ranking, then maybe trying to understand the livelihood portfolio as to where, then trying to understand maybe a seasonal calendar as to what they have been doing in the various years, various parts of the year. So these kind of group activities, and then the sharing of the experiences and learning which have come out in those exercises, we try to collate, analyze, and then present to them the list of the information, the list of those options which we have got from them in terms of maybe it could be pilots or it could be their needs which are reflected, and we kind of share it with them. Eva, next slide please. Can I have the next slide? Yeah. The second tool which we use then is on the city level climate change research, which I spoke earlier when I talked about the yeah. Yeah. So this next tool which we used was the city level climate change research, where we tried to develop a city profile based on the vulnerability and the needs assessment. So we tried to do a community and a city profiling where we kind of included the general information, which is the demographic, social information about that particular area. What is the existing infrastructure in terms of kind of maybe schools, hospitals, various other infrastructure. Then what are the general problems and the needs, a kind of a profile of the area. Then based on the climate change, what are the vulnerabilities of the area, and for which we kind of got the local, the general climate data of the region, the past climate change, extreme weather events, which we kind of got a lot of these information from the participatory exercises which we did with the community, and also tried to superimpose with the state level and the district level climate data which we got from various sources, including the meteorological department, the climate projections which we have at the state level of for Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh, and the potential future climate and extreme weather impacts on could be the key livelihoods and the sectors which the communities employed in that particular area, and then the initial ideas for the climate change adaptation measures based on the city profile and the assessment, the climate change vulnerability assessments. And then the disaster risk reduction, what are the non-climate change related disasters and what are the measures already which have been taken to reduce disaster risks, and some aspects on the energy and the climate protection. Yeah, so next slide. The next tool which we used was on the local adaptation and mitigation guides. Which was the local adaptation and mitigation guides were developed for all the 6 cities, which was again based on these vulnerability. The outcome of the vulnerability assessment was collated in a form of a document which is called which was called as the local adaptation and mitigation guide, which we commonly called as LAMGs. And in these LAMGs had this kind of a following structure, which you can see it on your screen, which we had these city task forces, the outcome of the meetings of the city task forces, the identification of the training needs which we had, the identification of the adaptation and mitigation strategies, and then whatever strategies which are there, how can these be kind of financed, and then the ongoing initiatives. And we also had for the city LAMGs in Tamil Nadu, a forward was received from Nagapattinam Municipal Corporation, Nagapattinam Municipal Commissioner, the RDOs, which is the Revenue Divisional Officer and Sub-Divisional Magistrate of the Poneri Town Panchayat and the Village Panchayat. So there was a lot of kind of consultation, and even in these documents, so that kind of resulted in the ownership of these documents by the city level authorities in form of municipal commissioners and the RDOs giving their kind of forwards and articles for these LAMGs. So that ownership kind of developed through this engagement process, which ultimately helped to kind of also mainstream the project into the local level planning. Yeah. Then there was a lot of awareness raising and capacity building, which we had these kind of the style guides, where you can see this presentation in a form of a separate kind of a structure. We also had a lot of training manual documents, and then accompanying workbooks also to collate all the data which we got from the community in form of vulnerability assessments and also the local level climate change data. Next. Yeah, in terms of what we did to kind of integrate the issue and mainstream the issue of climate change into the state level planning process in India, as Vishali has already was talking about the National Action Plan on Climate Change, and then there is already a state action plans on climate change. So what we did was kind of take two approaches. One is a top-down approach where we tried to integrate the issue in the various state level action plans which were being formulated at that particular time in 2011, 12 and 13. And then what we also did was also to take the bottom-up planning approach, where we took the district level and the Panchayati Raj institution, which is the village level kind of Panchayati Raj institutions for mainstreaming process. In India, the planning process mainly is kind of the way planning business is done is from a bottom-up approach. It is mainly we have these village plans which are collated into form of block plans, and then we have a kind of a district plan which integrates both the city level things as well as the village plans as well. And we also have a separate kind of although constitutionally it is not there, but then we somehow in the practice this process of disaster planning has been kind of well structured in India, and every year we have a lot of district disaster management plans which are being made. So for this we partnered with a national level institute which comes under the Ministry of Home Affairs, which is called as the National Institute of Disaster Management, where we partnered with them and tried to integrate the issue of climate change and the work which we were doing in these particular 6 cities into the local level district disaster management plans which were being made by the district authority. I tried to integrate the LAMGs within these district mitigation plans. The form of outputs which we kind of got was again setting up these institutional structures to discuss on climate change issues, which was the formation of city task force in each city for identification of the core issues. In Poneri Town Panchayat, the VNA which we did in one particular ward was kind of later replicated to all the 18 wards for assessing the needs, which was presented finally to the Chief Minister by the Chairman. So that particular work being taken up in the complete kind of all the wards and the whole process of vulnerability needs assessment which was followed in ADAPTCA project was replicated. In Kavali, the measures implemented in the LAMGs are being taken up by the RDO and the Municipal Commissioner, as what I earlier said, that the measures which were identified during these vulnerability assessments, which were documented in these forms of LAMGs, were then taken up by the district authorities and the local authorities for their own developmental plans and the works which they kind of enshrine in the district disaster management plans and the local level district plan. So these measures were also taken up there. The DC Vizag Tiruvallur Relief Commissioner nominated nodal officers for supporting the development of these village disaster management plans and district disaster management plans with NIDM. So there were separate officers working with NIDM on the issue of DDMPs, which is the district disaster management plan, and how to integrate the issue of climate change into these DDMPs. And then we also implemented a small pilot for the Ongole municipality on solar backup for the reverse osmosis plant, which was like mainly coming up as a drinking water requirement. Yeah. In terms of opportunities, in terms of learnings, what we kind of got was as we said that in cities kind of are large economies, and the growth of cities is very critical to climate change. And the local leaders are on the forefront of climate change at the city level. So that is a kind of an opportunity, and then a lot of financing, a lot of money flows in because they are kind of considered to be engines of growth. So there's a lot of money flowing in. So there is an ability by the city authorities to mobilize resources, whatever the needs are. At least they have that ability and awareness to kind of mobilize resources, and then also some kind of a freedom to innovate and try new solutions. But then the kind of challenges which we observed and which we faced during this particular process was again a different layers of policy making, as what I have been talking about, where we have on one side we have the disaster management planning, on one side we have the developmental planning. Within developmental planning also we have village level plans, the block level plans, then the district level plans, and finally these district level plans getting collated to the state level plans, and then state level plans getting kind of collated into the national level plans. And again these plans are within each of the departments kind of, and these departments are again working in silos. So there is a kind of a problem of convergence between different departments working together. Climate change is not a kind of a silo issue. It has cross-cutting ramifications in all the departments, but there is convergent action is kind of missing in these departments. Then there is a lack of local climate level data, which is very much needed for decision making. We still have a lot of data at the state level and then a little bit at the district level, but at the local level it is very difficult to get that climate change data which we observed when we were doing our vulnerability assessments. And yeah, and again, lack of capacity which is there at all levels, and the resources, and kind of trying to integrate the issues of innovative issues in these planning process. But certainly what we observed was the drivers of action which kind of prompted were these kind of vulnerability assessments which we did, and that's where we also faced which we got a lot of success in, which I mentioned for this Poneri town panchayat, where this VNA was replicated in all the cities. So these participatory tools which are kind of trusted and communicated also were drivers for action. And then a bottom-up pressure. Once the awareness is built at the community level, there is a bottom-up pressure, and then a crisis which is normally kind of creates a political will. We saw it during the tsunami time. We saw it during the disaster which struck the hills in India, in the state of Uttarakhand. So whenever there's a disaster, there's a lot of talk about climate change and how to mitigate the problems of climate change. And then the last but not the least, what we kind of also observe was whenever there's a business case for the action, it kind of works very well at the local level. So these were some of the kind of learnings which we got from by implementing the project in last 3 years. So that's it from my side. I'm sorry for all once again for the technical glitches. Thank you very much.
Thank you a lot, Manjeet. Thank you. Yeah, excuse the time as well to the audience. Well, it's our first webinar, and the technical issues are not set. We had 3 interesting topics, so we're still learning, and maybe the time was not sufficient. But so may I ask from the audience, are there any burning questions from your side? Okay, so I have one question here from Søren. Question to Soumya. What are the perspectives of rollout of urban LEDs, especially with regard to the further cities mentioned, after finishing project financing?
Yes, Ruth, thank you for the question. I believe you're talking about the satellite cities, if I'm not wrong. Now, for the satellite cities, that is something I did not mention in detail in the presentation. What we have done is we have gone in and actually developed their greenhouse gas emissions inventory, and we have identified their priority sectors under the current program. What we are now going to do is there are these large flagship programs that are coming in from the Government of India. 3 of them actually, one being the Smart Cities program, one being the Amrut, and the third being the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, which is the clean sanitation program of the Government of India. Now, we will be working with some of these cities under these various flagship programs, and especially for the smart cities and the Amrut, this is a process that we would like to use with these cities, with these satellite cities. Also, we are looking at having a phase 2 of if everything goes well, and either through Commission's funding or through other similar funding for similar programs. There are other bilateral agencies which are looking at similar programs, and we are in touch with them already. So these would be avenues that we would use to then roll out the Green Climate Cities program with these other cities. The 2 model cities would then continue implementing their lead strategy that we develop under this program. I hope that answers your question.
All right, Søren said yes, and Ritu has a question to Soumya. Are we also trying to bring the model satellite cities under the TAP?
Yes, like I'd indicated in the presentation, the TAP would be the immediate platform using which we would like to finance the lead strategies which are being developed, and also finance projects that will be developed by these satellite cities. The satellite cities, like I said, under the national programs are going to develop quite many developmental projects, quite many detailed project reports which would be ready for financing, including their proposed financial models, which would be the perfect stage in which we would then like to bring in international finance and support them in applying for international finance through the TAP platform in COP21. That would be the starting. Of course, TAP is much beyond COP21.
Thanks a lot. Are there more questions? So we only have 6 minutes left until the room closes, so I would like to summarize, and if you have more questions, feel free to approach the presenters and to the specific topic. So yeah, wrapping up these exciting presentations, it came clear that climate action planning has to be addressed from different levels and different stakeholders. Yes, to the question, we will also share these presentations, and there will be a recorded version online. Summarizing as well what looking at ICLEI's Urban LEDs, the Low Emissions Development Strategy project, we learned about the project implementation in Thane and Rajkot, 2 of the 8 model cities. Both projects included components on energy efficiency and training programs for its replication. And as we heard, it's a challenge to get the baselines and the inventory of the greenhouse gas emissions in place. And it was also interesting to see these 4 action pillars of the TAP that facilitated and ensured the project implementation. And the experiences of the GIZ Indo-German Environmental Partnership Program provided excellent insights to the assessment of risks and vulnerabilities of areas and groups that are needed for an integrated action planning, including the mitigation and adaptation actions. So also it was interesting to see the implementation and the way forward. So on one hand, it's on the local level, and on the other hand, center and state level. Manjit shared his experiences from ADAPT-CAP in the framework of the EU program that aimed to reducing the vulnerabilities of coastal communities and cities in Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. It was demonstrated how the urban approach of it is working on city as well as community level for climate change research. Several tools on local adaptation and mitigation were developed for 6 cities. Yeah, and interesting was as well, like your last slide on the main opportunities that were mentioned. So cities are large economies and growth is critical to climate change. Local leaders remain on the front line of climate change. However, support is crucial and highly needed from community groups. Finally, we see that a lot of efforts are taking place to shape our cities more resilient in terms of climate change. So there are 3 things I would like to mention. We need to assess impacts carefully in order to respond appropriately to the needs. So each case, each city is unique. Also, we need to provide good and innovative practices to show pilot projects, as seen in these presentations, to provide a good guidance for our cities. And a successful action planning requires the attention of governmental leaders, residents, and much more stakeholders on all levels. Thank you very much, and yeah, we're looking forward to the next webinar series.